Hey, this is part three of a three-part video. It was originally one big thing, and then I split it into three. So I recommend you go back and watch parts one and two, and then come back here. Thanks. And I just want to add one more piece after having recorded this one. I just want to name that this video focuses on some of the aspects of Buddhism that are a little deeper. In the first one, I focused on more of the fundamentals that are, I think, more easily provable, just kind of using logic and rationality alone. And in this second video, I get into concepts that I think really benefit from having a little more personal experience. Like if you've never meditated before, if you haven't really practiced mindfulness, if you haven't explored altered states, some of these things, I think can still be derived logically, and you're going to see me in this video try my best to do that. But I also want to name that it's normal if, it doesn't feel like a complete slam dunk argument with logic alone, because I'm going to be talking about the Heart Sutra and the Diamond Sutra, or kind of the ideas contained in there, and those are two of the most profound, important written works of Buddhism, and they're quite dense. There's a lot of information in there, and so in only 20 minutes or however long this video is, I'm only going to scratch the surface, right? So it makes sense if when you finish this video, you still have questions. And yeah, I have other videos on Buddhism, and I'm also happy to answer questions in the comments. So thanks for watching. So that's the core, and then maybe I'll take just a couple more minutes here and go just a little deeper. We'll see if we can cover some ideas from two of the most famous sutras, the Heart Sutra and the Diamond Sutra. So we'll go a little deeper into, because I'm guessing at this moment you might think like, yeah, all that sounds rational, but I don't believe you that that's all that Buddhism is saying, right? Like, sure, that all that makes sense, but I've heard that Buddhism is like a little more woo-woo than that. Like, it's not just about this kind of rational approach to reducing suffering. It also makes some claims about, the illusory nature of reality, or, we're all one, or something like that, right? So, yeah, there is more to Buddhism than just the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, right? So let's go a little deeper into these two famous sutras. So, as we're being mindful, we can, part of what we discover, right? If you spend hours meditating and examining the self, is it starts to feel kind of dreamlike, right? Like when you wake up from a dream, at first it feels really clear. Sometimes, right? Like you remember what happened, and then even like 30 seconds later, it starts to get a little blurry. Like, wait, what actually happened? And then you kind of forget it entirely. And then when you're in the dream, it kind of feels like there's like dream rules, dream logic, right? Like, okay, I'm here, and then, oh, suddenly I'm here. Oh, and suddenly this person's here. Oh, no, now they've turned into this. And like everything feels kind of weird. Right? And what happens when we really examine reality in our experience of life, at least I've found, is it starts to feel a little weird and dreamlike too, right? Like if you think about how memories work, like science tells us that, every time, from a neuroscience perspective, every time you think about a memory, those neurons fire, and they change a little, because now you're a different person. Each time you're different as you remember that memory. So literally every time you think about a memory, it changes subtly. And so, there's tons of research showing that we don't exactly remember what actually happened. We remember kind of our framing of it. Right, and there's a lot of research showing why, like eyewitness testimonies aren't actually that trustworthy because of this, right, and other factors. So the mind is really good at uh, making us think that we're seeing things very clearly, almost like we're, um, imagine like there's a video camera in front here, and we're this like little self in the brain that's watching a perfect video screen of reality around us. And that's how it works, right? But that's not quite true. Like these, um, photons are bouncing off objects and hitting our retinas, and all this processing happens based on kind of the rules in our brains, our past experiences, pattern matching. Our brains are trying to figure out what are these photons pointing to, right? And then we come up with these ideas about, oh yeah, that's a bed, that's a cat, right? That's my hand. um, but as you really practice mindfulness and you sit in there and examine, like, what is this really? What am I really experiencing? Things start to feel kind of a little blurry or a little more illusory, especially after a few hours of meditation. And even if you do it with your eyes open too, like if you really like stare at a wall for a while, or you stare at like wood grain for a while, or um, even just like you really play with like the visual field, and you look out there and you notice like, okay, it looks like that tree's over there. How do I know it's over there and it's not actually right in front of me? Right? It's like your brain uses these kind of rules and shortcuts, heuristics, and like, okay, because it's smaller, that probably means it's farther away. But it could also just be like a really tiny tree that's right in front of you, right? How do you actually know unless you put your hand out and touch it? Um, and similar, like you hear a car go by. How do you know that it's happening over there and it's not the sound right next to your ear? Right? No matter where the sound is coming from, you're always experiencing it right here in the same place in your eardrum, right? So, yeah, there's kind of a lot to say here to really make the point, but I think maybe the thing to point out is just that the more you really examine reality, you really slow down, you really check it out, your moment to moment experience, kind of the weirder it starts to seem, the more dreamlike it starts to seem. And really just noticing that everything is changing all the time. Nothing is really static. Like if you're meditating every day, you start to notice like, wow, I feel different than I felt yesterday. Even you meditate an hour from now, you're going to feel different from an hour before. And we know this in physics, right? Like nothing is actually static. There's always like electrons are flying around the nucleus, they're popping in and out of existence, right? There's so much, craziness happening at a quantum level, and it's reality is not as fixed as it seems, from the typical human perspective, right? Like you touch a rock and it seems to be solid, right? But if you zoom in with a microscope, you're going to see there's a lot of empty space. There's a lot of stuff moving around, right? And so the truth of reality, whether examined through science or through a lot of meditation and mindfulness, is you start to realize like things aren't actually fixed. They're not really static. Things are constantly changing. Some things change more slowly, some faster, but you are always changing too, right? Like every day, billions and billions of cells in your body are dying and being reborn, right? And so, this is just kind of a core part of Buddhism is practicing accepting that the only thing that always is the same about reality is that it's always changing, right? And so it's important to just not attach too tightly to anything, right? Because who knows what tomorrow brings. And that's not to say like you shouldn't attach to people, you shouldn't love people, you shouldn't have a favorite object, right? But again, it's according to the Four Noble Truths, like just don't hold too tightly to like, I want this thing to be here forever. I want this thing to never change, because the truth of reality is change. And if you hold too tightly, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to suffer. And, again, when we really examine objects, whether scientifically or just philosophically, it becomes more clear that things are a little more paradoxical than they seem, right? Like if you look at, there's like the famous ship of Theseus paradox, right? Which is like, if you replace a ship, a wooden ship made of planks of wood, and planks are kind of rotting away, and you remove one rotting plank and replace it with a fresh one. And you do that over and over again with all the rotting planks until eventually the entire ship has been replaced with new wood. Is it the same ship? Right? That's kind of a famous ancient philosophical question. And it's paradoxical. Like the only logical answer is no, of course it's not the same ship. It's literally every component has been replaced, but it also is the same ship because it didn't all happen at once. When one plank was replaced, of course it's still the same ship. When a second plank was replaced, of course it's still the same ship. Like that first plank has now been integrated into the concept of this ship, right? So the nature of reality often is really paradoxical in that way. Like it is the same ship, but it's not. And it's like you've got a table with, 4 legs, and if you asked, what is the table? Well, it's the whole thing. What about is the corner the table? Sure, yeah, I guess you could say that's part of the table too. Is the leg part of the table? Yeah, okay. So what if you remove the leg? You unscrew the leg from the table. Is it still part of the table? No, obviously not. Right? But okay, now you screw it back in. Now it is the table again. Okay, so what if you unscrew 2 legs? Is it still table? What if you unscrew 3 legs? What if you unscrew 4? Now it's 4 legs and a tabletop. Where's the table? Right? Just all sorts of weird stuff like this in reality. Like, what are you? Are you consciousness? Are you body? Are you brain? Is one cell you? Is a million cells you? How many cells does it take to be you? Right? Like it's reality is just paradoxical like that. And Buddhism embraces that. It's saying often, if you're asking, is it this or is it this? The answer is, it's both. It's neither. It's everything. Right? And that's where, Buddhism kind of supports, I think, a lot of these weirder, more modern scientific discoveries about how reality actually works. And it also feels confusing sometimes and confronting sometimes. And this is where the concepts of there's a concept in Buddhism called emptiness, which is that all things are inherently empty of just being one independent thing, one static thing, right? Like the table example. What is table and what is not table? There's like this inherent emptiness in it, because where is the line between it being table and not table? It's fuzzy. Where is the line between it being old ship or new ship? It's tricky. And so as we go deeper and deeper into this investigation, right, like where is the line between the tree and the air around it? Well, what about when the tree is literally pulling air, carbon dioxide, into its cells? It's quite a porous boundary, right? The air is outside, the air is not tree, but then the air is pulled inside. Now it's part of tree. Now the air is tree, right? And there are processes like that in our body all the time, right? So, at what point is the water in the glass, and then you drink the water, now it's in your mouth. Is the water part of you? No. Okay, well, but then the water goes down, it's absorbed into your cells. Okay, now the water's in a cell. Is the water you now? Right? And so that's where we get at this concept in Buddhism of non-duality. That it's not water, me, air, tree, table, leg, table, right? All of those things are dual concepts. And Buddhism would say the truth of reality is non-duality, that it's all just flow. It's all just energy. It's all just one thing, flowing from one state to another, from one form to another. It's all emptiness and it's all solidness. It's both, right? And there's this famous line from the Heart Sutra: form is emptiness, emptiness is form. So that basically states the paradox of things, right? You yourself, you are form and you are emptiness. And so non-duality also applies to consciousness, body. It's not two separate things. It's one thing. Matter, thought. It's all just one. There's not a separation. Everything just is. It's all just flow. It's all just awareness. It's all consciousness. It's all, at the end of the day, Buddhism often doesn't claim to have all the answers. The Buddha would often tell his followers, like, don't ask me super philosophical questions like, where did the universe come from, or what exactly happens after death. Those things don't matter, and who knows? We can't explain a lot of this stuff. It's all just kind of illusory, confusing, paradoxical. And so what can we do? We can come back to mindfulness, to meditation, to what do I actually know is true. I am awareness. I am here in this moment. I'm experiencing stimulus. And that is the path out of suffering. That is the path to reality. Just awareness, just examining again and again, coming back to this moment, not the past, not the future, because those are just thoughts, but coming back to what is here, right now. That's Buddhism. And so I've covered the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, a very short summarized version of the Heart Sutra and the Diamond Sutra, two of the most famous works in Buddhism. I have no idea how long this has been. Probably more than 15 minutes. But I think I did a pretty good job of rationally covering all the major components of Buddhism. And obviously there's a lot more. It's not like Christianity where there's just kind of one book, the Bible. In Buddhism, there are many works. Because the Buddha is not the only one who is said to have achieved enlightenment. Especially in the Zen lineage, there are many people over the years, many masters who have, done a lot of meditation, done a lot of internal work, and who have achieved some level of awakening to more of the truth of, that deep, deep wisdom, that deep truth of self and reality. And they've written many books too. So there's a whole library of books in Buddhism. There are many approaches, many paths. Zen is just one, and there are many schools of Buddhism, many ways, but they all focus on these core Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, meditation, mindfulness, these core ideas. All right, so that is my attempt at explaining Buddhism rationally. I'd love to know how it landed with you. If you're a rational skeptic, how does this sound? Did I miss something? Am I fooling myself? Are you able to argue against any of these things? I hope you found this interesting. And if you want a nice beginner's resource to learn more about Buddhism, I recommend the book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Shunryu Suzuki. That was my intro to Zen. I hope you have a nourishing day.